Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Seabass, as we talk Vanderbilt sports and just about all baseball in this one. This show is sponsored by the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water. The Well is a coffee house with the mission to bring clean water to the world. To date, over 30 communities across the globe now have access to safe water, health, and hope. You too can make an impact by visiting a Well Coffee House location today. There are 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those are Brentwood, Green Hills, Downtown, Bellevue, and Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news presented by Sutherland and Belk, a local injury law firm committed to helping those who've been injured in accidents. If you or someone you know has been in a wreck or other accident, reach out to Sutherland and Belk. See what your rights are. You can find their contact info at sbinjurylaw.com. Super Regionals for the series with Duke have been set for this weekend in terms of times and TV. Game times are 5 on Friday, 8 on Saturday, and if necessary, 2 on Sunday. Games 1 and 3 are on ESPN2. The middle game is on ESPNU. The guest line is always sponsored by Boll & Branch, which was started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on these sheets for years. I knew nothing about Boll & Branch until I got these sheets. And I swear to you, the minute I started sleeping on them, I've not slept on anything else in my house. They are fair trade certified, which means they're made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but I'm wasting my breath because you're not going to do that. You're going to love them that much. Once you have the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled BOLL. Enter the promo code Vandy, get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us from WNWS, as he does just about every week. Thank you for joining, my friend. We were having a fun conversation off air before we went on air, or I guess it's not on air, it's on podcast is a better way to put it. But in any case, we were reminiscing some good times of years ago.
Absolutely. He was telling me about the time back when he was in high school. He was a big-time athlete, and he was sidelined for 2 weeks because he had flea-eating hermit crabs in his jockstrap.
Yeah, that was really close. That's very close to what we were talking about.
Man, not at all. We were talking about a great day for us, a day that was, look, I mean, I've been in radio for 20 years. I've had a lot of fun doing a lot of things. You've been a writer, had your own website, done radio, podcasting, all this other stuff. But I said, Chris, I was thinking about something we did the other day, and it was a post-game show that we did back when Chris was on radio in Nashville. And we did the post-game call-in show from the studio after the Wake Forest game. Now, before the post-game show, I believe we stopped by Outback, right? Isn't that right, on the West End?
Yeah. Do you remember what happened when we were at the Outback?
I do. The Alabama-Auburn game, the one where the missed field goal was returned back for the touchdown for the Auburn win, happened. I remember an entire restaurant was like a beehive. It went crazy. Servers were jumping up and down. Cooks were going crazy. Maitre d's were, hitting people in the face with a rubber duck. It was amazing. And if I remember correctly, didn't our waitress, her grandfather played at Alabama, if I remember correctly? She was just devastated.
Yeah, I think that was the case. Of course, that was the kick six, which Rod Bramblett called. Yeah. And boy, speaking of that, what a tragedy that was a couple of weeks ago.
How horrible that was. No doubt about it, man. But yeah, I mean, we were there, and I've never seen a restaurant. It converted from a nice steakhouse to just like a fraternity house. It was unbelievable, that moment right there. And then we proceeded to head over to the studio, and we did the post-game call-in show after the big win over Wake Forest when Jordan Matthews made that insane catch on the sidelines. I think was it a fourth down conversion, Chris, if I remember correctly?
It was like a circus catch. And I think you got the order reversed. I think we went and did the post-game show because that was like 45 minutes after the end of the game. And then we went back and watched the kick six at night. But either way, we did them both. That was a fun day. You and I spent a lot of time together. You did a couple of post-game shows with me, didn't you?
Yeah, I remember one that we did with you, myself, and Javon Hay was with us. We went back and did that. But, I'll tell you, that post-game call-in show, the reason I thought about it is because that was one of my most fun radio memories ever. Such a big win. Everybody was excited. The phone lines were flooded with Vanderbilt football fans calling in. And the crescendo of it was, and the dude had just got through doing his own post-game show. Of course, our fantastic voice of Vanderbilt Athletics, Joe Fisher, who I'm a major fan of, called in to talk about the game with us afterwards. Unprompted. We didn't call him. He just called in. And we were talking Vanderbilt athletics and everything was wonderful. It was just, and I just remembered that day and thinking that's about almost as much fun as I've ever had doing radio.
Do you miss when we did that? I know you only joined me on occasion, but you did do it a few times.
Do I miss it? I mean, you have to understand, Chris, where I am to get Vanderbilt talk. Every now and then a Vanderbilt fan will call. But other than that, if I don't bring it up, it's not going to be brought up. So to be at a place where people are calling in and that's the main subject and they want to talk about it and they're talking with people who they know what they're talking about. No offense to some of the other folks there in Nashville. From what I understand, though, some of those radios hosts don't care a thing in the world or don't know a thing in the world about Vanderbilt. But they knew that they were calling in to two people who it mattered to and who knew what they were talking about. And it's fun to interact with people like that, especially after a game-winning catch and kick like that, where everybody was in a great mood. Yeah, I missed that, man. I would love to do that on the reg.
Yeah, that's been... Man, I last did radio in 2015. That's been a while.
I last did radio at 11 o'clock.
I know. That's a hard business. I don't think that I'll ever get back into it.
The thing about radio, and I know this sounds crazy, but if you find a station, and not all of them are like that, but I happen to have a station that I've worked at for 20 years where the owner's great and the general manager's great, and they don't ever, I don't ever cross paths with them. I see them all the time, but they let me do my thing. They don't ever tell me, you can't do this, you can't do that. You go do it and have fun. And that's it. And they stay out of my way and they give me what I need. And I'm completely loyal to them for that fact.
Yeah. There's two kinds of radio jobs. Generally, there's one where you get paid a salary and you have a good situation and you've got people to sell ads. And there's another one where the talent sells all the ads, is relied on too. And that's the one I was in. It's like, if I'm going to have to send somebody a check, and I'm going to have to go do it myself, I might as well just do a podcast and keep all of it on my own. So this works out better for me. But if you've got a good situation and in radio, it's great, stick with it. But that's why the turnover in that business is so bad, because the pay is not great, and a lot of times you're raising your own pay.
Yeah, no doubt. And everybody driving down the road that hears the stuff, everybody thinks they can do it, and some can. I mean, some of them are right, but it's a very difficult business, and generally, for the most part, you have to pay a bunch of dues to get to get really going. Now, that's not always the case. Some people get a break here and there. But it's certainly fun. There's nothing more entertaining for me. Now, I have a show coming up on the air in 2.5 hours, and even 20 years in, you know what I love about the show, Chris? I don't have an idea of how it's going to go.
Yeah,
it unfolds right before me. I love that. I don't have production meetings. I know the information I need to know. I react well with my callers, and I get in there, and they don't know what's going to happen, and neither do I. To me, that's the best kind.
Yeah, when I did the college sports report, I did 2 hours a day every day, and you walk in July just thinking, I have no idea some days what we're going to talk about. And I'm thinking, I've got maybe 10 minutes worth of material, and you just somehow you find a way. And that was the fun challenge of it all.
He said, joining me today is Oregon State special teams coach.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but the one thing that I have come to understand, and a guy like you who knows his stuff and works hard, there is, yes, I get it. There are highs and there are peaks and there are valleys and that type of stuff. But I have never, and if I ever come to the realization that there's nothing going on, nothing to talk about, then I'll go find another line of work.
Yeah, you make a good point. The thing that always bugged me, and that I tried to do in radio, is always try to do my homework, because it always bugged me when I listened and people didn't do that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And look, it's entertainment, so it's not just information. You got to have both. But yeah, the best part about it now, one of the guys that I've done radio with, and I tried to explain to him from the very beginning, is that don't be afraid to say I don't know. Because the biggest sin of all is not knowing and trying to BS your way into something. And the people that are listening, generally, they already know. They already know the answer. They're seeing what you know. This isn't politics. You can't BS people. They'll know when you do and don't know your stuff. You know what I'm saying? That's just a fact. The ones who don't know their stuff will become combative, especially when they see they're painted into a corner, and they'll try to turn it over and change the subject and all this other stuff. What they're really telling you is, I have no idea, and this is my only way out.
I remember one time when I first started doing this being the website, I was listening to a very well-known quote-unquote expert on SEC football talking about the quarterback battle at Vanderbilt. And he was talking about how a certain guy was probably going to be their first-team quarterback. And I'm thinking, well, that's funny. I was at practice yesterday, and he was running a distant third team. So that was the stuff that always just annoyed me. I'm like you said, just if you don't know, say you don't know.
Yeah, nobody's going to get mad about that, but you can't walk it back once you put it out there. So just say, I don't know, if you don't know. Trust me, when Chris asked me some stuff today on this podcast, you'll hear me say, Chris, oh no, I don't know.
What would you like to talk about today? And I don't know is not an acceptable answer.
I don't know. Why don't we start with a little baseball? You down with that?
I am always down to talk baseball. You know that.
All right. So where are we at right now? Are we 27 of 28? Is that where we're at?
I think it's 25 of 26. You may be going ahead and giving Vanderbilt 2 wins against Duke, which is probably what's going to happen. But it's a roll for sure that they are on.
Some of the discussion that I've had with some of my people on this end of it, because actually, like I told you last year that college baseball started picking up some steam around there. Well, we're getting some chatter about it again this year, especially because Ethan Small's from right down the street.
Right.
So we got a lot of chatter about that. In fact, I talked to his mother yesterday during the show. Boy's a good kid. That's a good kid right there. And he's awfully good. But I got to tell you, this Vanderbilt team, Chris, this team right now sounds to me like the team that you described. You remember when they were doing those series way back, well before the season started, and they played, I don't know, was it like USC or Stanford or somebody like that? And they were just taking them apart. And I remember you telling me, you don't understand. This team has the chance to be, the team, that kind of team, the one that we talk about for years, and of course it's been a very good year, but this last month and a half is just beating all I've ever seen, Chris. Like you said, 25 of 26. The bats, and I'm going to tell you something else. When you've got a 9-hole hitter winning regional MVP because all he does is get extra base hit after extra base hit over and over, and it's such a good story. When you flip over a lineup with that right there straight into to Austin and then JJ, who has a chance against that lineup? Drake Fellows at this point, and Kumar and Mason and everybody. How must it be for them going out there and realizing I know I got my stuff. I can trust it, but I also know I don't have to be perfect, and I don't have to put that stress on myself. I've got the backing. My guys are going to come up for me. Now, I know Ethan Small pitched to Jim against them, and that happens every now and then. But this lineup, Chris, I mean, and you look over the stretch, and if I remember correctly, we're outscoring our opponents in this stretch. Is it, Chris, 9-4 by 5 runs a game? 5 runs?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's been all year. That's the crazy part, whether it's been the SEC tournament or the regional. And I am big on margin of victory because that tells me a lot about how strong your team really is. They just keep beating people down. And here's the crazy thing. I was thinking about this today. The 2 commodities that I would most want. One, I would want a stud hitter like a Martin or a Blade because that guy is in the lineup every day, including the midweek. The other one I would want is a stud Friday guy. And this is probably the team of all his teams, other than maybe last year, that most lacks the stud Friday guy, and yet they have not lost an opener yet. This team is bananas.
And look, if somebody on the surface, on the outside, say, how can you say that you don't have a dominant guy? Drake Fellows went, 10-0 in the regular season? I think it was. But and as a guy who I was already a big fan of Drake anyway. But after San Diego took him yesterday in the 6th round, now I'm doubling down on that. But Drake is not a dominant pitcher. He's a very good one. There's no doubt about it. And when he locates, he's tough to deal with. But he's not a dominant pitcher. I don't. At least in my opinion, Chris, I don't see him as a dominant pitcher. But I see him as one who is certainly reliable and has gotten the job done all year long.
No, I could see him, though, as a bullpen arm for the Padres for 2 reasons. He's got a pretty good slider and a pretty good fastball. He's got a couple of pitches, and that's what you need. Second of all, I think between the ears, he's tough as nails. There's been some times he didn't have his stuff and stayed in games. I think of the Illinois State game, which I think was maybe in the cold or the rain or maybe both. I don't think it was super cold, but there might have been a little bit of weather. But I remember he gives up a grand slam 4 batters into the game and gets out of that game, I think, having gone 6 or so, and Vanderbilt ends up winning that game. And I see him work his way through jams. Sometimes it's not ugly, but I think that he's between the ears a really competitive kid, and I think that's the kind of thing that can make a difference at that level.
Yeah, I think so too. And I agree. Working on another pitch will be paramount. I saw where they were capping him when they were talking about his potential, his ceiling. They were capping him as a 4 in a rotation, as somebody's 4. You think that's possible? Now I'll say this: with what they have, he'll never scratch that rotation as their 4. With what they've got now and what they've got coming up, because it's absolutely loaded. But and it makes me wonder if, because of that, Chris, that they consider using him in that capacity, maybe in the bullpen.
A couple of thoughts. First of all, I looked up that outing just to make sure I was right. In that one, he goes 6 innings, gives up 4 runs, all earned. Of course, those are the first 4 hitters of the game. 9 strikeouts, 6 hits, and 4 walks. So not the best outing, but he pitched well enough to get a win that night against a team that darn near got out of Louisville, by the way, in case you didn't notice. On the starter, I don't see him being any higher than a 4. I don't know that I see him being that. Again, I think that there's only so many starting pitchers in baseball. I mean, he did it in college and went a complete game a couple weeks back. So maybe he can. I think that he's probably more of a reliever, but could be wrong. I think they would try to groom him as a starter and see if it works. I mean, you already have history knowing he can go deep into ball games, but when you get to that level, there's only 5 rotation spots. And of course, baseball's changing too with openers and things like that. I don't know if the Padres have used an opener yet, but there might be room for him at the major league level.
Yeah, the only reason and this was not a slight against him. I mean, obviously he's just now entering their system, but you just do a little projecting what they have right now. I mean, you Mackenzie Gore, Chris Paddock, Denilson Lament, Eric Lauer, Joey Lucchese. He's not going to supplant any of those guys, you know. And they're all young. They're all very young in the process, but they all have much higher upsides, I think, than Drake. But yeah, there's certainly a place for him in this farm system, and I'll be real interested to see how they use him, and does the fact that they have a lot of young depth change how they use him.
Yeah, boy, it's been a busy draft for Vanderbilt. Not just the guys off the current roster being picked, but the prospects. And by the way, a couple of them have been picked as we've been talking. The Angels took Spencer Jones in round 31, just after the Brewers had taken Parker Noland.
And what round was that?
31.
In round 31. One of the ones that I found interesting was, and help me out here with this, because your scouting analysis would be far better than mine. And I think I have the round right, Chris. If I'm wrong, tell me. That Stephen Scott went to Boston in the 10th round. Isn't that right? Was it 9th or 10th round?
Yeah, he was 10th round, last pick of day 2.
Yeah. My question was, because I mentioned that last night on the show, and I said the one question that I have is just exactly when it is as far as he translates to the major leagues, just exactly where would you target him? Is he a corner outfielder? Is he athletic enough to play that in the majors? How would you use him?
That's a great question. I think he's a guy who has carved out maybe a utility role. I think he's a corner guy. Certainly he's not a center fielder, and probably a left fielder, but he's played a few reps at first. He wasn't going to get a lot of reps there because the guy he was behind at Vanderbilt was a SEC Gold Glover. He has caught a little bit. I think he might be a nice guy to have on your team as an emergency catcher, but mostly a left fielder and some ability to maybe play some first. And you're seeing that a lot at the big league level. Guys that are 12th, 13th guys on the roster in terms of offensive players always play multiple positions. I think he's an intriguing guy. The knock against him obviously would be age. It's different between guys. There's a big difference between guys hitting the way he hits at 22 or however old he is, and at 19. Now that's a world of difference, but it doesn't always translate just like that. And I think Boston's a smart organization between what he can do at different positions. And I don't know that he's great at any of them, but you want a guy on your roster that in a 13-1 game can play somewhere and give you guys a rest. And he's got a power bat, man. I mean, the power's legit, as you know. He's one of my favorite guys that I've watched come through Vanderbilt. I'm kind of intrigued to see what happens with him.
Do you think he's a better? Let me ask you this: how much better of a hitter? And I'm not talking about power-wise. I'm talking about base hits. I mean, I know he's got a home run swing. I get that. But as just a pure hitter, rolling that bat head over, slapping a single, pulling one down the line. How would you rate him as just a hitter?
Oh, he could use some work. I don't know that he hits a ton of stuff to the opposite field. I'd have to look that up. The thing that I like about him is I'm always biased to guys who take walks at high rates. And he walks 15% of the time this year. He walked a lot last year. Now, he's striking out 21%, but that's not bad in today's baseball. That's pretty acceptable. I like him. I mean, I like that pick for Boston.
Oh yeah, me too. I just couldn't use them. And obviously there is no answer across the board based on what you're saying. What you were saying is kind of what I was figuring, But I mean, as you mentioned, the power without question is there, and I guess possibly could offer some DH role, I suppose. So he was an interesting one. Then, of course, JJ going to Florida, going to Miami at 4th overall. I was hoping he'd slip to 6th, but no surprise there. By the time the draft was there, I think it was pretty clear that he was going to be going in that 3rd or 4th slot.
Yeah, I didn't see him dropping out of the top 5. No, he's got a I guess he's going to be playing for probably the worst organization in baseball, but he'll be making a big check to do it and probably be
Them
somewhere
along
else
with
by the time
Baltimore.
he starts to hit his prime.
Yeah, them along with Baltimore, they both not the best in the world.
At least you feel like Baltimore cares.
Well, I mean, well, you got to ask yourself, you think Jeter cares?
I don't
I
know.
think he does.
Probably.
I think he does.
They sold off everything that they had coming into the last couple of years. And they got rid of Christian Yelich and Real Muto and Ozuna. It might have been a couple of years before that. I don't know. But I don't like it when teams do that. I mean, Miami had a decent foundation to compete and just threw it away.
Man, now I'm gonna say something, and I mean, you may disagree with this, and I may be completely wrong, but man, I think that organization was snake bit the second that Jose Fernandez passed away.
Well, you have a good point, and maybe the dismantling started before Jeter. I don't remember the exact timeline. I could be wrong. I just never liked the way the Marlins ran their organization under the previous ownership. I thought they used the taxpayers. Now, having said everything I just said, I thought the trade they made, and I don't want to spend long on this because most of our audience doesn't care, to get Sixto Sanchez and giving up Real Muto was a great one because I think Sanchez is a stud. He just got to stay healthy.
Yeah. There's no doubt. So we'll see. I think JJ, progresses pretty quickly. I don't know about you, but I see a 2021 ETA.
Yeah, there's not a lot there holding him back. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the majors for good this time next year.
Oh, you think 2020?
I don't see why not. I mean, what's left? The only thing that I see from him is that he's a kid who used to be a line drive machine. And now that he's put some loft in his swing, he flies out a lot. And that's replaced some of the extra base hits that he used to get to the gap. He doesn't hit as much. And Defonte's the same way. They don't hit as much hard. They just hit it out of the park. There's not as many hard line drives as there used to be. So that's the one thing that I'm a little bit hesitant about. But I mean, that's really going deep to pick flaws because he can field his position and right certainly adequately. The arm is really good. He's athletic enough. The value with the bat, with the home runs. I mean, he's a better player as much as that element of his game is gone, even with the extra outs, pop outs and stuff like that it probably whittled a few points off his on-base percentage. He's more productive because more balls are flying out of the park and by a pretty good margin. So anything that I would say about him would just be quibbling. I've seen him hit a little bit of everything. I guess he needs to hit lefties a little better. That might be one thing. But the kid has hit since the minute he got on campus. I always felt as a freshman, people didn't understand how good of a hitter he was, and I didn't know that it would play out the way that it did. I didn't see J.J. Bleday being a first rounder, but I always felt he was a better hitter than he was, and look at him now.
Yeah, and he's a mature hitter, and he's going to need to be, Chris. He's going into a division with some great arms, some great young arms. The Aaron Nolas of the world, the Matt Sorokas of the world. Holy cow, he's unbelievable. Syndergaard and some of the guys up north. I mean, there are some big arms in this division. He's like I said, I think he's a very mature hitter. I was saying 2021, but you're right. I mean, there's just not much there between him and the show, and he's probably ready next year. You're probably right about that.
Yeah, I don't know how much the Marlins will hold him back because of how that works with service time and stuff, and you see guys staying down in the minors till May when they're clearly ready. And I don't know how much of the collective bargaining stuff, I can't remember when that's up, will change that. Probably eventually it will because I don't think that's working out for anybody. But that could keep him down a little bit longer, and I wouldn't blame the Marlins for that. But other than that, I just don't see a lot there that he can't go in and hit Major League pitching right now. Maybe not lefties, but I think he could at least platoon in the bigs right now.
man, there's nothing more dangerous than a very good left-handed major league pitcher. That they're artists, man. Man, they are so good at what they do, man. There's not a much. I mean, think about this, Chris. What would you say? And I have no idea, but you might. What would you say the split is between as far as an ERA goes for lefty versus lefty and righty versus righty? Because I mean, a lefty sliding away from it is just about impossible to hit.
I think it's about a half a run. Could be inching up closer to 3/4 now that there's just more runs scored, period. But I think I remember hearing half a run a few years ago.
And that's significant, right? I mean,
yeah, that's winning and losing a half dozen games a year, if not more than that, maybe a dozen.
Yeah, that's extremely significant, man. So you're right. I think that's the one thing that he'll have to be dialed in, and maybe the minors prepares him for that. But he's a disciplined, great hitter. Okay, what else? You got anything else on the draft?
No, I mean, we could talk about the draft a lot. I mean, glad to see Ethan Paul get picked in day 2. Of course, they'll have to hold their breath with those prospects. Now, I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see how this draft affects the team, because I think you could see, for instance, Ty Duvall got picked by the A's today at 25th. Now, if Philip Clark goes, then I'd look at Ty Duvall and say, hey, there's opportunity to catch full-time and up your stock for next year. And he's a really good player. I don't know that Duvall would make enough money to go and sign and leave anyway. And I don't know his situation with how much college is costing him or his family situation or anything like that. So this is all speculating. But I just see a lot of things here with how maybe what one guy does may affect others with that. And maybe, who knows, maybe a signee looks at the roster and maybe a Pat DeMarco or somebody goes. And Pat got picked by the Yankees today. And maybe if he goes and leaves now, maybe there's more opportunity for a guy to play as a freshman who's on the fence. I may be reaching there, but I do think it's interesting. Just so many guys are getting picked. I do wonder how that affects guys' decisions as they see what other guys do.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. Let me ask you a question. Two questions, then we'll move on. I'm trying to remember. Ethan was taken. Who took Ethan? Was it the Pirates or the A's?
The Pirates have taken him, I believe, 2 years in a row.
And he went, what, 9th round? Was that what it was?
That kid really helped himself. That's another kid. You talk about having versatility and making a roster. Ethan's had a really nice year with the bat. I want to go back to something we touched on earlier. I knew this team had the potential to be special. It has exceeded my expectations, which were pretty high. And after I did some predictions, I think I said before the season, I think they would go, I think I predicted 21-9 or 20-10. And I thought later that might be a game generous just because stuff happens in baseball. I think I picked them to lose 13 or 14 in the regular season. They lost 10 and still haven't lost since, including both tournaments. This team has exceeded what I thought it could do. And I think that applies to Ethan too. I knew Ethan was a really good player. I've always been a fan of his game, but I never had a clue that Ethan would be just so flawless almost at short. Not quite to the level of Connor Kaiser, who is, but Connor would make plays that Ethan can't, but Ethan has just been so accurate with his throws, and as Corbin likes to say, his heartbeat for the game is right there. That, to me, the way that he has played it short has been one thing that I did not expect.
All right, I'll give you one more question before we go something else. It's a true or false on your part. All right, let's do a little prospecting. This isn't anybody that got drafted. Let's do a little prospecting into the future. True or false? Austin Martin will be drafted higher than J.J. Bleday.
I'm going to say false just because I think next year's a better college pitching class. So some arms may go ahead of him just because teams are going to need pitching after this year being frankly, a crummy year for college arms. And B, I just think that home run power is such a big thing. Everybody hits home runs. That's not something Austin has proven yet. I think there's room for Austin in the first round. I don't think that he goes higher than J.J. Bleday.
Let me, if you will. I mean, and yeah, I agree with the power. I don't know how much it plays, but he's nobody's slap hitter. You know, isn't he pretty much great at everything else he does? I mean, great. Some of those, some of these bunts that he charges on, where there's just no chance you get to that ball. Remember the one last week where he was behind the third base bag, and like a few feet behind it. And Holmes drops this amazing punt right down the line. And not only does he get there, he gets there and throws out a pretty speedy runner. And that runner should have been getting to first base by the time Austin touched that baseball, or what a regular player would have done. Man, if I'm a scout and I saw that, man, this is one of those deals where you can either do that or you can't.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even notice how far back he started, but the part of the play that I saw from the point that I started watching him when the ball was hit was amazing. He didn't have any room for error on that play, and he made it. To your point, I think he is pretty good at everything. The home run thing is I'm not going to say the hole in his game because he's jacked a few and he can hit them. It's just the thing that he would maybe need to show a little bit more of, and I don't even know how much that's worth messing with because what he does as an offensive player, just the value in the line drives he hits all over the field, is something in and of itself. Maybe you don't want to mess with that, but it is crazy how quickly he has gone from guy who can hit, we don't know what his position is, to holy cow, he's good at third.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, so let me ask you a question. Because he's certainly bigger than this guy was, but I mean, from a power standpoint, you wouldn't say he's like a Juan Pierre type of hitter, would you?
Oh no, he's got 5 bombs this year, and a couple of them have traveled a pretty good distance. No, Juan Pierre is not who he is. I'm just thinking more of your prototypical, when we grew up, second baseman hit 10 home runs a year, that kind of thing, 8 or 10.
Yeah.
More that kind of guy. I can't think of an immediate comp. Maybe for some reason, Ben Zobrist is in my head. I don't know that that's it, but somebody like that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Because that's what I was thinking. I'm looking at Austin's games. He's no little slap hitter that, needs a huge gust of wind to get one over a short fence. I think he's got more pop than that. But, I just love his glove. He's fast as he can be on the bases. Great contact hitter. Because you asked the question. A question was asked you out of the mailbag. We had one person coming up to bat, and you went unconventional. You went with Austin Martin, and I didn't have the guts to. I didn't have the guts to do that. But it's not like I settled on J.J. Bleday. But I think you're right. He's that type of player.
Well,
he's so full of tools.
And it's funny, somebody asked us about Martin as a first rounder, and I think we totally dismissed that. It may not have been on this podcast, but about 6 weeks ago, that guy was well ahead of us. But do you remember the other 2 guys that I said I really liked at the plate in clutch spots?
Was Phil Clark one of them?
Clark was one and Duvall was the other.
Mm-hmm.
And they had about the 2 biggest hits of the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. And especially when we start getting down to the bottom of the lineup and they're hitting the way other people's top of the lineup is, and then some, it's not even fair. At that point, it's not even fair. We're not even talking about Austin Martin and J.J. Bleday at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd said that their best 2 hitters don't really have good weekends, and I don't know that anybody in the top half, other than maybe Clark, had a great weekend, I would not have thought they'd won that regional by 20 runs.
Yeah, because JJ really didn't do much in the regional, did he?
Oh, he and Austin were fine. They just weren't what they've been, and which gets noticed when you're spectacular all year and all of a sudden you're more ordinary.
Now, the one thing that we simply have to mention as we get ready for this super regional with Duke, and obviously we're the prohibited favorites here, but you know, if I said that ninth inning in the second game against Indiana State didn't make me nervous, I mean, I'd be lying, Chris. When Tyler does it, I don't know what we're going to do, what we'll do. And we could easily face that against much better baseball teams. In the very near future. How do we handle that?
Well, let's look at what happened last time he blew up. He came back and was just on fire his next 10 outings, didn't give up a run. So I don't know what the deal was. I don't know if it was tipping pitches. I know his velo was down. I think he was 91 on the home run he gave up, which he's usually right around 94, 95. He walked a couple guys. So I don't know if just giving up his first home run of the year may have rattled him, because he did something he never does, which is give up a bomb. And then he did something he rarely does, which is give up a couple walks. And I know one of the singles was kind of a seeing eye thing. So it may just be one of those things where just crazy stuff combined to happen at once. But the velo is something I will watch. I think if he's 91 again and he's not up 93, 94, 95, maybe there's something there. But I think we'll see him pitching again pretty soon in that spot.
And that's another one of those things where the numbers may not sound like it, but that is significant. It just is.
Oh yeah, he's your best. 91. He's your best reliever. Honest to God, I don't know that I'd trade him for anybody in the country.
Okay.
In terms of closers, and I have not looked at stats. I just know what I think of him. When the kid is pulling a 7-1 strikeout to walk ratio, and he's been through the stuff that he's been through in his life, I just don't know how big of a deal throwing a baseball is.
Yeah, understood, and agreed. So, but let's just say that does happen. Then what?
I like the way Eater's thrown. Fisher is a little up and down, but you can't hit him even when he's down. King threw better. I don't know, man. They just keep seeming to find answers. Ethan Smith, I don't think pitched in the regional. He's a guy that I really like. I think Ethan can get in-game outs maybe right now. I don't know. I just think that this team's theme is they always find something. I mean, you had DeMarco down. You had Davis down. You have other guys step up. You had, who was it? Gillis and King weren't what they thought, but Eater stepped up big lately. Fisher is a guy that they've trusted probably as their first arm outside of Brown in key situations. I just think, again, there's so many talented kids on this roster. You look at the number of guys being drafted. I mean, they may set a record for drafted players as we're speaking here.
That is awesome.
I don't know. It's not over yet, but I just wonder if the headline when this is done isn't going to be this was his best ever, and it won't maybe be emphatic enough that nobody will argue. We will wait and see. I don't know. I think I look down that bracket in Omaha. If they get there, which I think they will, I'd be very, very surprised if they don't. State's the team that concerns me, and maybe UCLA on the other side, but I think State's the team that if I'm them, they're obviously not intimidated by State because we've seen it, but just given what happened in Nashville last year and what I saw of Ethan Small when they played at a time when nobody was shutting their lineup down, that's a little spooky.
Yeah, I think they're the two best teams in the country.
I do too.
Yeah, and I love. I mean, it's become a little bit of rivalry, but that's the team to me. People can talk about Florida and all this other stuff. For me, that's the team. I don't hate Mississippi State by any stretch, but that's the one that I like to see them play. You know what I mean? That if I can line up and beat anybody and get in there a great series, two teams that are premier the way they are, to me, it's Mississippi State.
Oh, I don't think that team is hurting for confidence, but I would have to think if they get through Omaha with State in its side and they get to the championship game, I would have to think that they are very confident at that point, feeling that they've gotten their hardest work done. Now, I know UCLA was number one all year, but I just look at the stat sheet and I watched them a little bit last week. Their offense does not scare me nearly to the degree that State's does. And I think their starting pitching is really good and polished, but I don't think they got an Ethan Small.
No, they don't. I don't think they do. Yeah, I'd be much more afraid of him. There's no doubt. And I watched UCLA a little bit in their regional. They were fine. I mean, do I think they're better than Vanderbilt? No. Do I think they're better than State? I'll put it to you like this: if they were playing in Omaha today, and UCLA and Mississippi State were playing, and it's one game, I'm taking State.
Well, I look at it this way. I think going into game one, I think State wins that game because it's small and because it's got a better lineup. I don't know about game two. Somebody brought up on the board about JT Ginn has struggled lately, and I have to look that up. And he's a freshman. Maybe he's hit a wall. There's a drop-off to their three, and I'm not crazy about their bullpen. But they hit the ball so freaking well that I don't know. I think they'd beat UCLA. I'm with you.
Did you see where I remember his name now. I don't know if you saw this. I'm sure you know the name Blaze Jordan. Does that name sound familiar to you?
It's not ringing a bell.
He's the young man who, out of DeSoto Central who they call the next Bryce Harper.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The reason I bring him up is because he has reclassified. He is now a part of the 2020 class. So he'll be playing. Yeah, he'll be playing as a senior. And from what I was told, that's the most likely the indication that, because he's been committed to Mississippi State for like 3 years. That most likely he will, in fact, even if he gets drafted way high, that he's going to go to Starkville for a couple of years.
Speaking of State in the draft, did you see that? Carter Stewart, I think it was. I think he signed in Japan.
I hadn't read anything, but I did hear something about that. It was him and somebody else, two people. I think it was.
Yeah, that's the oddest path. Like he reneged from State, went to JUCO for a year, and rather than go in the draft, he just signed in Japan. Which I wonder if more kids don't start doing that. You think about that for a minute. That's smart. Because those guys sign huge MLB contracts. I mean, you go through the draft process and, you're capped at how much money you can make your first 5 or 6 years. And then you hit the free agent market, you make a gold mine. But seems to me like he's just taken an in run of all that. It basically declared free agency a lot earlier. I wonder if that's something other people might not try.
Well, like I said, I think it was him and one other notable person, and I don't remember who it was. But, they're starting to do that now with basketball. You saw where that one of the top 5 players in the country is headed to, what is it, like New Zealand to play with an Australian team or something like that, or one or the other, instead of having to go, to a college for 1 year. And now somebody said, well, you do that, but then you don't get paid. I said, heck, he's taking a pay cut to go to Australia.
Oh, he is. I think it's great, though. Speaking of that, I will give you one more. I'm not going to do an NCAA full-blown rant this one, but I was watching Rob Manfred talk the other night, and the MLB Network host, Greg, what's his name? You know who I'm talking about. Yes, who I really like.
Oh, me too.
Was asking him about the draft and, they're having that Red Sox game, I guess, in Omaha and all that. And I've always just assumed that the problem was Major League Baseball. But if they're going to play a big game in Omaha with major league teams, and Rob seemed very sincere about concern for the draft and overlap and stuff like that. And I was looking at Twitter, and I don't remember the exact tweet, but Aaron Fitt tweeted something about that basically the NCAA is holding that back. In other words, it's not an MLB thing as much as the NCAA has been the issue with that, which that blows my mind. As little as I think of the NCAA, it never had occurred to me that they would be that stupid, that they're the ones that are apparently holding this thing up, which, by the way, maybe explains why when I asked Tim Corbin the other night about was he relieved about not having to play the night where his players were being drafted, and he basically said, don't get me started on that. I thought, well, that's kind of odd. That's an MLB thing, but if it's an NCAA thing, it makes more sense why he didn't comment. I don't know the full story, but that was really intriguing because I'd always presumed that the reason they didn't go to Omaha and make it a big event was MLB, but I was watching the commissioner speak, and it just seemed like he was very sincere in his desire to create a better way. Maybe I misread some of this. Maybe I doubt Aaron was wrong in his info. Maybe I'm reading too much in here, but into this what was said and what was tweeted. But it's like, holy cow! Maybe it's not MLB that's screwing this up. Maybe it's the NCAA.
Well, let's just say that that's the case with the NCAA. Why? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know if it's got something to do with amateurism or what it is, but I just, like I said, I just think I've been in academics. I think that the people that work in that field have been in that oftentimes so long that they just have no touch with reality. And I think that's got a lot to do with the NCAA's issues. I just think that those people live in their own little dream world, which doesn't work anywhere outside of their little cubicles.
Right. Great. Let's see. All right, it's 4:10. I got about 10 more minutes. What else you want to do?
Let's go to the mailbag. And some of these are repeats, but I want to get them in out of respect for the listeners.
Okay.
Today's mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. You need an insurance agent who wants to know your unique needs and circumstances and will tailor an insurance plan to fit them. Josh is your man. Call him 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my agent. Give him a shot. You'll be pleased. You have nothing to lose, and you will help the program and a good guy at the same time. Mr. Vandy wants to know what you thought of Julian Infante winning MVP of the regional and what you think about Vanderbilt's chances this weekend against Duke.
First of all, I think that was a well-deserved honor. Julian was completely dialed in. I mean, when he wasn't hitting the ball over the wall, he was just missing it. He was absolutely smashing. You know, he had that one game, I think it was, where he had a couple of fielding errors, but after that, made up for that too. Well-deserved, and I think that has an opportunity. Chris, I don't know how you feel, but that has an opportunity to pay big, fat dividends for us in the Super Regional and hopefully Omaha.
Yeah, with him, it's always been confidence. He's better about laying off breaking pitches and doesn't get the constant barrage of them like he used to. Yeah, I mean, Julian has gotten on streaks before that last a bit. Wouldn't shock me to see this one have some carryover.
Let me ask you this, because I thought about this the other day. You leave him at 9? Don't mess with a good thing?
No, I don't mess with it at all because I think in that spot he doesn't feel a lot of pressure. There were times earlier in the year where he was producing better than maybe a guy or two ahead of them, and they left him in that spot. And there might have even been some righties clustered. Like, I thought that he hit better than Ray, but the one thing that you got to consider is beyond the numbers, the psychological impact of stuff. And I just think there's something about hitting in the 9-hole when you're a kid like that who's pressed so much, knowing that, hey, I'm in the spot where if I hit anything, it's a bonus. I wouldn't do a thing there.
Yeah, me neither. Well said. I would not change a thing either, my friend. And yes, brother, I do believe they're going to go to Omaha. You know, look, Duke, if I remember correctly, I read, Chris, they were a 500 team in conference play this year. And everybody's saying, you know, yeah, well, they're hot right now. That's true. That's true. And that's great. But how could they possibly be hotter than Vanderbilt right now?
Well, they're not.
They won 25 of their last 26 games. That's the definition of hot.
They also don't know if they'll have their shortstop, who's one of their best two hitters available for the weekend. The kid who is taking his place hits nothing, and by nothing, I mean nothing. So there's that. They don't have Graham Stinson. They don't have Oh, I think they got another key reliever who's not coming this weekend too, who's not going to dress. So I just think Duke's a team that had Duke been the Duke that Duke thought it would suit up, that might be a pretty tough opponent. I think the one that got there was a little bit fortunate to get there and probably a lot fortunate to get out of Morgantown. Now, having said that, it's baseball, crazy stuff happens. You know, a guy hits a fly ball with the bases loaded with 2 out in the ninth. A guy leaps over the wall and makes a catch. That's 4 runs that don't happen. So there's high leverage situations like that in baseball all the time. A gust to win something like that can change outcomes. But I don't see this as the team that advances from Nashville.
Agreed. All right. And you said you have one more question for us?
Yeah, this one comes from Knoxville Door 94, and we've spoken about it most of the time, but he wants to know your thoughts on the draft. So anything that you didn't speak about that you feel inclined to bring up here, let's have it.
Let's see. Mentioned Ethan, mentioned JJ, mentioned Steven Scott. Who else did we not mention? Then we mentioned the draft picks. Just one thing. One question for you. The biggest win for Tim Corbin and the biggest loss in this draft, I would guess, if I had to make a pick on the biggest win, would be getting Jack Leiter on campus. I guess. I don't know if that's the right answer or not. Now, as far as the biggest loss, what would you say that would be?
Biggest win would be him with Spencer Jones after that, and you may have some wins to come with the DeMarco or Clark. Those would be pretty significant as well. Biggest loss, no question to me, is Volpe, because I think he was the kid that they had wanted to be their shortstop next year.
And he went where?
First round of Yankees, pick number 30. And I think losses to DeMarco and Clark would be losses. So, again, it's going to be a really interesting summer to see what happens with those kids. By the way, Jackson Gillis got picked 13th round by the Brewers, and Zach King was picked by the Marlins that round. I wish those two kids the best. Jackson in particular had a rough year, and I know he's a better pitcher than he showed. You hate to see a kid that just has it all crash down on him like that for whatever reason, and just this should be a time where he's enjoying it. I mean, I'm sure Jackson could have gone pro out of high school, and you think, hey, I'm a junior. We'll be contending for national titles. I have a big role in that. And, he did. I still think about, when I think of Jackson, I still think about him striking out Seth Beer with the bases loaded at Clemson as a freshman. And I still think that guy's in there somewhere. I hope that it ends well for him and for Zach.
Well, sure. Me too, for all of them. No question about it. Okay. What else? Big pimping?
Oh, by the way, 2 more. A.J. Franklin, I was not surprised to hear he got drafted Royals 16th round. That's earlier than I thought, but good luck to that kid. He has really, not going to say made a nice career for himself because he didn't pitch a ton, but to elevate yourself to that spot was a real accomplishment. And the one that I didn't even think about, I didn't realize this kid was draft eligible, was Joe Gabalo, who pitched, 3 innings in a Vanderbilt uniform and is not on the 27-man roster. He went to the Rays at 16 today.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But hey, think about that for a second. A, that speaks to the respect of Tim Corbin's program. But B, I mean, look, we're going to recruit like this as long as Tim Corbin's the coach here, as long as he's the manager of this team. But man, what does that say to recruits when you can go say, first of all, it's Vanderbilt baseball. But I mean, what is that like when you can look at these parents and say, man, we got guys ain't even playing, going in the top 15, 16 rounds.
That's a heck of a recruiting pitch when you go to kids and parents and say, hey, come here and you may not be good enough to play, but don't worry about it. You're going to get drafted anyway.
I mean, think about it. It's just kind of like with Alabama at football. Josh Jacobs didn't even start. He didn't even start, and he was the number 1 running back in the draft and by far the best one in it. and he didn't even start. But that's one thing. But when you can look at a guy and say, you ain't even got to play and you can get drafted. If you come put in a couple of years in my program, you're going to get a shot. People are going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and the rest will be up to you.
It's been a crazy year, man. It has been a really crazy year.
There is no doubt, my friend. All right, that's all I got.
Yeah, I'll let you go because we're coming up on an hour, and I know you've got to get ready for your show. If people want to listen to it, where can they find it online? Where can they find it on the radio dial? And where can they find you on Twitter?
Well, listening to my show is the right thing to do, y'all. First of all, you can find me on Twitter at CheapSeatsBass. You can find me online at WNWS.com, and you can hear me on 101.5 FM Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. on the Cheap Seats.
Thank you as always.
Thank you.
He is Seabass. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. We're going to try to do one more of these before end of the week. So stay tuned for that one as we drop it.